Hi, it's Joy and today I'm going to be watching Titan Season 3, Episode 5, Lazarus, which is a very exciting title. I'm assuming it has something to do with the Lazarus pits, but it also, I suppose, could just be a reference to Lazarus. And I'm wondering if that means we're finally going to get some information on on Donna and Rachel and Themyscira, or I suppose it could also be to do with Jason. But I'm just really hoping we're finally going to get a little bit of information, at least, about Rachel and her efforts to revive Donna, but we will see. I have loved Season 3 so far. It has been very stressful, and thankfully for me, I've only had to wait a couple of days because of my COVID jab delaying me watching the last episode, but I'm ready. I'm on track with this episode. Reminder that you can find the unedited version of this reaction and all of my reactions on my Patreon, but as it always says, it gets towards the end of the month, and I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record. If you remember that when you join up to patrons, you have to pay. You pay your pledge the day you sign up, and again on the 1st of the month. So obviously if you sign up on the 4th of the month, 10th of the month, it's not that big a deal. If you sign up towards the end of the month, that's when you're going to start having to pay twice in a row. So just be aware of that, so you can either wait or just know it's going to happen. But yeah, anyway, Titans, let's go. Where we left off. Was that Dick's reflection he saw?
He won't stop, not after Hawk.
Then why did you kill Hawk? Jason. Jason! This guy really has managed to manipulate you, hasn't he?
You need to stop being afraid of Dick Grayson. I'm not afraid of him. Of course you are.
I did Google him, and of course he's the Scarecrow, and he works with fear, which makes sense. With the conversation he had with Dick, that was in the back of my mind, it being something like that, and obviously that makes sense with Jason being afraid, feeling a lot of fear where we last left him, and now that he's using his fear of Dick, which I truly think he must have done something to make him be that afraid of Dick Grayson, because if anybody is there for him to be terrified of, it would not be him. Jason, this isn't you. I feel more at ease, at peace, that this isn't entirely Jason. It's not like they've said, oh, Jason just suddenly lost it and became evil. Like, I still think he'll have a lot to answer for, but it's 100% something that he's been brainwashed into. Or at least 90% something he's been brainwashed into, I don't know. Okay. He needed help, like psychiatric help. Does he... Is it because she died and he feels scared that he'll die too?
You're okay. You're safe.
Was he having a nightmare? Bruce did notice his nightmare. I thought he was like fully hallucinating, but it was a nightmare. Okay, Bruce, I'm glad you noticed. It is hard to help someone who's spiraling and is...
People have bad dreams. It's not a thing.
It is a thing!
I'd like you to see an old friend of mine.
Okay, Bruce, thank you for trying.
He agrees with you, you can go back to being Robin, but until I hear the word from her,
I agree with Bruce here. Jason is a hard person to deal with, to know how to deal with. At least Bruce is trying more than it seemed he was when we last saw him, when Jason was doing drugs and running off.
You've been different since you've been back.
He has. And he needs help. Even your friends are noticing.
Worth trying.
Jason, when he's himself fully, does want to do the right thing. He just does not go about it the right way.
Joker last year.
How do you know that?
I'm still me.
Right, that's one of those things that sounds real cool but doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go introduce ourselves.
Maybe not.
Okay.
Just a conversation.
Maybe not.
Come on. Let go!
It's awful because, like, he's spiraling and he doesn't want to admit he needs help, so he's going to push away every single attempt to help him.
You get people to open up about their shit and you give them pills. Happened to me when I was bouncing around state.
Remember, this is a shrink that Bruce pays for. Like, rich people get better treatment.
I never took them.
It was as close to hell as you can get when you're alive. If Bruce hadn't saved me.
If only this prompted Jason to open up too. Jason. So did he try to start manufacturing Scarecrow's drug himself to try and help him get over his fears? Instead of just talking about it with someone. Bruce really should have destroyed all this stuff.
know it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you, son.
Son?
Oh.
Yeah.
What goes wrong for Jason? Like, this is promising. There's so much hope here.
The
And I'm
cops
proud of
got
Bruce. I feel like he's learned a lot from what happened with Dick, and he's actually trying to be there for him more than, from what we've heard, he ever has been before. And like telling him how he feels about him in his own messed up way. Oh, what goes wrong for Jason?
Sorry, man. Father. Bruce. San Francisco. Man had the gun pointed at you.
Jason's actually engaging? What
Oh,
goes wrong
Father,
here?
I'm supposed to be afraid. I can't be like this. I'm tired of being afraid.
Sweetheart, you're
All the
human.
time, the nightmares, the handshaking.
You're a kid who's had way too much put on his shoulders.
Loses faith in somebody, he takes it all away. Molly likes Jason. Because
Mm-hmm.
Jason's a real person. Robin, on the other hand, is a construct. Made by a crime-fighting vigilante who has a borderline personality disorder.
Very true.
Robin, want to be Robin again? That's great. If not, great also. Work for you? Yeah.
Oh. This is just like, if this was where we, well, if this was the first episode, I would be feeling so much hope for Jason right now. And it kills me to see where he is.
Just because you're afraid doesn't mean you're broken.
Exactly.
I want you to hear someone say that. And mean it.
I know Bruce's weird upbringing of, or at least, I mean, Jason at least wasn't like quite as young as Dick, but Bruce's whole thing of fear is the enemy, you don't make it, or make fear your tool, don't feel fear, is just, no. Is this the alleyway?
Robin is tearing you apart. Wasn't fair of me to push you.
You didn't push me.
This is such progress from Bruce. You needed something.
The city does things. I don't want you to be Robin.
Oof.
You talked to Leslie.
I didn't speak to her. This is my decision alone.
You should have, in a way, not that she can speak, go against. Oh, fuck. Everything was going well.
I did exactly what you asked me to do.
I can see how this set Jason spiraling.
Talk to her. She's
You don't need to wear a costume to be my son.
Oh my god. No, he doesn't.
So I'm a fucking mistake now?
Forcing you to be Robin is.
And no matter what he does, you keep on giving him more and more.
So this is why the fear toxin makes him hate Dick and think he's the enemy?
What's so bad about me?
Nothing. He loves you and he wants you safe, and he can see that you aren't a right fit for this and this life.
But I've made my choice.
This is so awful because Bruce truly means this. He truly means that he loves Jason, and he's not going to like kick him out of the manor and be like, you're nothing to me. He just recognizes that Jason was not the right person to pick for this role, for this responsibility, for the trauma that he's been through. I mean, no kid is, in my opinion, you know, look for 20-somethings if you have to. But he truly here, I give a lot of credit to Bruce Wayne. You know, I talked a lot in my last reaction about how this show is really showing the darker side of Bruce Wayne. But what I'm really glad is we've seen kind of hints in some of how Bruce has dealt with Dick more recently. But I'm really glad that we're seeing in this episode that yes, the show is not shying away from the darker aspects of Bruce Wayne and the darker aspects of how he's raising his kids. Dick as well was a lot younger than Jason when all this began. But Jason was also in a very vulnerable state when he was taken in. And I think we're seeing that through Dick walking away and Dick kind of holding him to task for how he raised him, while also then kind of coming to terms with it, Bruce is trying to do things differently. That's why he initially sent Jason with Dick, so he could have a different influence. And here he actually was trying. And like the way they talked in the first episode where, you know, Bruce was like, oh, you noticed things I never did, I kind of assumed he hadn't noticed that Jason was spiraling this much. So I'm really glad that we have seen that Bruce not only noticed but has tried to do something about it. It makes my mind feel a lot at ease that we are still exploring the darker side of Bruce Wayne, and we can't ignore that darker side is there, and that some of what he has done to Jason was wrong. He's recognising that now, and that what he put Dick through was wrong. I think there's nothing wrong with taking in a kid and giving them sort of self-defense training, or like training so that they can be strong and confident, and if they're ever in a dangerous situation they can take care of themselves, and then when they're an adult, giving them the option to join you in the crime fighting, when they probably will because they've been raised that way. It's different to doing it when they're still a kid. And so from Bruce's point of view here, he is 100% looking at this kid, and he can see that he is suffering, and he can see that he is failing, and these nightmares he's having aren't about his upbringing and his childhood. They're about San Francisco and being kidnapped and tortured and thrown off a building. That is the root of his pain and his fear right now. It's the trauma of what he's been through. And maybe it is true that he isn't the same as Dick, but no one is. We all have different responses to traumatic situations. We all have different psyches and different personalities, and Jason was not at a place where he could take this. But I think Bruce is truly just trying to say, look, I love you, I'm going to keep you safe. It explains why he was looking for Robins before Jason died. So, you know, when Dick threw at him like, oh, even like you've been looking for replacements, he's barely dead, I guess those replacements were from, but then he just wants Dick to come home. But I suppose, and be Robin, I guess that was kind of because he like wanted Dick to come home, which if he'd have just said, son, please come home, I need family right now, Dick would have responded very differently. But anyway, from Bruce, it truly is just trying to protect this kid he loves like a son, that he can see that he is pulled into his darkness the same way he did to his other kid, and it wasn't the right thing to do in either case, but most especially with this case, it is destroying Jason. And, you know, we know that Dick has gone through a lot as a result of his upbringing and as a result of becoming Robin. We know that he stood by and let the man that killed his parents die, and then he fell out with Bruce, and kind of all that trauma, that maybe if Bruce had noticed him spiralling before it got that far, Dick would have been better off. So I think Bruce is truly just trying to do the right thing by Jason here. But what he is also doing, he's being Bruce Wayne. He isn't kind of considering Jason's perspective to this, to suddenly, out of nowhere, just be told, yeah, you're struggling, you can't be Robin. And when he thinks, but I've been doing the right thing, I've been helping, I've been opening up, I've been being emotionally honest, and I've been getting therapy. And we just had a therapy appointment where she said, it's up to you. If at the end of this you want to be Robin, you can choose it. She might have got him to the state of not being Robin through self-acknowledgement and realising that he doesn't need Robin to be good enough. Whereas then Bruce pulling it out from under him right now, as much as I understand why Bruce is doing it, and I'm not hating on Bruce for doing it in any way, I think Bruce is trying to do the right thing here, and probably is doing the right thing here, you can just see how for Jason it's such a slap in the face given all the progress he's made and how much he's trying. I wish the part he'd focus on was, you don't have to be Robin to be my son, because that was such a beautiful thing. That was such an emotionally honest thing from Bruce. And so you can really see how, after all of this, Jason running off and getting killed by the Joker when he wasn't around would have got to Bruce even more than it would have done if things were just normal, because he really had been trying, and that maybe if he hadn't taken the role away from him, Jason wouldn't have done it by himself. Obviously there's still 20 odd minutes left of the episode. I don't know if that all takes place within this flashback, then maybe there'll be more to the story than that. But it's killing me, because Jason was so close, and he was getting the help, and he was doing the work, and he was being emotionally honest, and he was healing, and he was learning, and he was growing as a person, and he truly may have grown to realise, I don't need to be Robin. And I think in a way, once he felt like unpacked a lot of the trauma of San Francisco with the therapist, he might have started to touch on a lot of his resentment towards Dick, because he kind of in some ways, especially he used to, looked up to Dick, because Dick was the original Robin, he was the one he wanted to be as good as and then better than, and then he sort of feels like, well, Dick was the original Robin, I'm just the replacement, I'm not good enough, Bruce must love him more than me, if he'd never left, I wouldn't be here. You know, I think there's a lot of that there, and you know, that needs to be worked on, and I assume that is what has been extrapolated or exaggerated by the fear toxin and everything into taking all of these churning resentments, and I guess in a lot of ways potentially he has a fear that he is second best to Dick. He has a fear that everybody prefers Dick Grayson to Jason Todd, that he is the not as good Robin, that he is the not as good son. So in that sense, that's what turns into like, he's the enemy who will never stop coming, and it's interesting, but I'm really so thankful for this episode so far, because it's been so eye-opening into both how Jason got where he got, and it's also heartbreaking, because I can totally understand. I mean, Crane is a very important part of this, but I feel like, sorry, I've done like a review portion in the middle, but I'm feeling a lot of emotions and I just had to vent them out. I'm very sorry. So my heart is breaking for this boy right now because he deserves so much better than this, but I will give Bruce so much credit for the fact that he has grown so much since him raising Dick and since Dick leaving and everything. I think that really has helped to teach him. And then having a kid having screaming nightmares every night, maybe raising these children and saying to them fear is like, you know, don't feel fear, fear is your weapon or whatever, isn't the healthiest thing to do. But I'm going in circles now, but I'm just feeling a lot of feelings right now.
We could both use time away from Gotham.
Bruce,
You're wrong about me.
you either have to make him go with you or stay to prove you love him.
Jason.
Reiterate the son part. Oh.
Fire! Jason.
She didn't talk to Bruce. Bruce came to this by himself, thinking it was the right thing to do. Oh god, all of that progress gone in an instant. Jason. If you suddenly were to become ridiculously fearless and running around with no fear, Bruce would bench you twice over.
Information on the man who put you in here. Betrayal. More like doing to others.
Jason, these are his own choices.
And to fly me out of here on his wings, the same way Batman brought me in on his. Get a pencil.
Okay, at this point, I fully and completely... This is Jason's doing. Like, yeah, I get that he's messed up and struggling. JC, I understand how he got to this place, why he's got to this place, but he had everything in front of him, and he always goes to the worst possible solution. He is his own worst enemy. He is just destroying himself. Because working with Crane, you know, it'd be one thing if you got the formula from him and then were like, fuck you, I'm not working with you.
We need to test our concoction on Batman's most fearsome enemy.
Bring it.
So that's why he went up against the Joker by himself, taking his fear drug. It's just, this is so messed up. So many of these choices were Jason's. And I know he wasn't in a good headspace, but he still turned to Crane instead of to literally anyone else. Because we could have done with that for Donna. Guessing Hank was in a few too many pieces. And I know from Arrow, Lazarus pits make you kind of psycho. Is that part of Jason's killing all his friends attitude? How does this guy have this ability to get here? Arkham is corrupt as much as it is messed up.
Because we have so much work to do.
Jason.
I cooked you up an extra special dose. Drift away.
I don't entirely know why he's decided Dick is his greatest enemy of all time, but okay. How is he allowed to dance around Arkham like this?
No fear.
So if we get him off the drugs, he still has to kind of answer for going to Crane in the first place.
No you.
And he's not brainwashed so much as just
Has done to us. And
an
then
addict. So he still went after this guy because he views him as a bad guy, which he is.
She's one of the good ones.
So he views himself as being a good guy still. But why would he kill Hank? How does that fit into his great...
Jason? I don't know what you're doing,
I don't think this is the way.
but you need help.
Jason, listen to the one person you still trust and care about. This was a very good episode, a very necessary episode to put all the pieces together and to see how we got where we are now. And I talked a lot in the middle about my stance on Bruce and Jason and everything. Just to quickly kind of recap it. I am really pleased that they have shown us that Bruce has learned from his past mistakes or lack of emotionally being there for the kids he's looking after, and that he tried his best with Jason. And obviously as an audience we can see that he screwed up with kind of Jason doing everything he wanted, and then he threw it all away. It almost might have been better if he had spoken to the therapist, not about every aspect of Jason's therapy, of course not, but about the whole thing of like, it's a deal that if he feels he's ready to be Robin or not. And, you know, I'm pretty sure when we get through the therapy, maybe he won't think that anymore, because with a lot of therapy, he would come to realise that he doesn't need Robin to be fulfilled. But of course, instead, he went to Crane, and Jason has very much always been somebody that is sometimes slow. It's very obvious, and understandably because of his experience, it's slow to accept when people are good to him and when people are caring about him that they mean it. And I think he was really moved by Bruce saying he was his son, but he'd rather be Robin than Bruce's son, and someone he cares about. I think Jason is definitely his own worst enemy, because he gets a slight and he's like, fine, I'm going to take revenge, I'm going to burn the city down. You know, someone nudges him on the pavement, on the sidewalk, and he'll turn that into blowing up a building with rage. And it's just kind of, he's his own worst enemy. And as a character, you can see how he got here, where he is. It's so painful as a viewer to see that he was getting the help he needs and then it was just thrown away. Also, Bruce has a therapist. Why haven't the Titans been phoning her, having visits with her every freaking episode? They need it. I want every episode to end with them all saying, oh, I've got my appointment now, I'm going to therapy. But I just was really impressed with Bruce this episode. I think he definitely was trying, and I suppose you can maybe see that part of what made him snap was the fact that he felt like he'd been going out there on a limb to try and help Jason, but that he'd only pushed him further away, even more so than he realises in the situation. I'm very intrigued if at some point we are able to get hold of Bruce. I mean, Gar left him a message where he said Jason's alive and is Red Hood, right? Or was that the episode before? I don't know. But if he finds out that Jason is not only alive but is becoming a villain with Crane, he should be coming back right now to try and help him, or help stop him, whatever the situation is. Now when it comes to Jason, the pain he's in, I can't imagine. The fact that he was getting help, he was responding to it, he was feeling good about himself, kills me, because he then threw it all away, and he did throw it away. I know what Bruce did hurt him, I know Bruce taking Robin away hurt him, but he chose to completely ignore the part of it where Bruce said, you're still my son. And what he could have said, tried to say, is, and obviously he's not particularly emotionally aware either, like, I have a deal with a therapist, you know, we're going to see whether or not I can be Robin, but it kills me that he didn't take more note of the you're my son regardless line. And that his response to Bruce saying, you're my son, nothing's going to change that, but I don't want you to be Robin anymore, is to be like, I'm going to go work with a math murdering serial killer, or like, I'm going to go work with a supervillain. It doesn't, those two points don't meet, which is where I think Jason's culpability does lie. Now yes, I definitely think the second he went there, Crane scented his vulnerability, he saw the opportunity to manipulate. Probably when he got Jason to tell him literally everything, he would have been like, oh yes, oh, that Dick Grayson's not a good guy. You know, he would have definitely been a lot, you know, kind of needed all the points he could. But it's pretty shitty that Jason not only went to him to help him, agreed to help him break out, and agreed to tell him everything about the man that calls him son, about the man that has been there, they recently tried to be there for me, and just because he took away something doesn't mean you do what Jason has done. So I think I can feel for him, I can feel bad for what he's done, but I'm also feeling a lot of anger towards him because he chose to give in to the rage. He chose to not accept the benefit of the doubt that Bruce said he didn't speak to the therapist, that the therapist didn't speak, like, you know, he chooses to always see the worst of every situation. And I know that is because of the experiences he's been through. Sorry if you have my doorbell and you might hear the door opening and closing, but he is his own worst enemy and he's destroying himself. And there is no excuse for going to work with Crane. Like, yeah, I can get the idea of the fear-free drug and everything is something that you feel you need, but there's just no need. There's no excuse for what he did. There's no excuse for going to him. Maybe make a deal with him, and then when Crane's like, well, aren't you going to tell me everything about Batman now? Aren't you going to help me break out? You can be like, as if I'd make a deal with you, supervillain. You know, I think if there's one person you can break your word to, it is a supervillain. But instead, Jason told him everything and became Red Hood. So the trauma of dying definitely was terrible, and I definitely think Crane has been manipulating him and has been manipulating the situation and pushing him down this path, but Jason started walking that way and has made no attempt to walk back. And obviously dying is a very traumatic experience, very terrifying. Without the drug, that would be yet another thing for him to be having nightmares about. And so therefore Crane giving him the drug, and the way he said, I added something a little extra, makes me feel like it's something a bit more addictive or a bit more to make him easily controlled, or just kind of amplifies it, which puts him firmly in Crane's grasp because he needs it now. But I just think the way Jason has abandoned every single one of his morals with regards to his friends and his family, that yeah, they all screwed up, yeah, they weren't all there for him, but Dick was there for him in San Francisco. That's what kills me. Yeah, he wasn't perfect, and yeah, there were mistakes. Dick was not there for him like 100%, but Dick was there for him. He was trying, and it just kills me that Jason has thrown away everything, from Bruce calling him son and saying that you're my son regardless, to ever reconciling with any of them, to having dreams where Donna says don't come or something. I don't know exactly what his dreams were. I guess it was to do with Donna died and he thinks he's going to join her, but he killed Hank. Like, I know that when he takes the stuff he's emotionless, but I just think Jason will have a lot to answer for if we're going to ever, like, capture him, imprison him, get him sober off the stuff, and then get him a lot of psychiatric help to get him back. He's going to have a lot of guilt and a lot to work with and a lot to make up. You know, if I was Dawn, I don't think I could ever look him in the eye again. I don't think I could ever necessarily accept him becoming a fully good guy given what he did and how sadistically he did it. It's such an interesting question that they're posing, but it's just so painful to see that, you know, I've been honest and open about the fact that ever since season 1 episode 6, I think it was, Jason Todd, I have had red flags about Jason. I have not liked how violent he was with the police for no reason. Like, just because you don't like police, I don't necessarily like the police. You don't beat them up like that. He probably could have killed some of them with the level of violence he was exerting when they were just there to try and, they weren't even there trying to do anything nefarious. They were just there doing their jobs and potentially helping someone. And his attitude towards Dick was always like, oh, I'm better than you. And Dick was just kind of like, okay, I'm just a bit hurt that I was replaced so quickly by my dad, but okay, kid. You know, I just think, like, from the beginning, Jason has had this, and it's his personality, it's his character, I get that, and, you know, over the course of season 2 in particular, I did grow to like him, because we saw underneath the harsh exterior, we saw kind of the vulnerability, the scared kid that he is and has been his whole life, and that is what the experiences of Deathstroke brought out, and that's what he was struggling with this episode. But we also have to acknowledge that while he is someone that you can feel sympathetic for, he has made choices that are terrible. He has made choices that there is no excuse for, no explanation for. He has jumped from point A to point C to point Z. You know, he has just not... I just don't agree with Jason right now. Obviously we don't. He's the villain of the season, or at least in his own mind an anti-hero. And, you know, I'm glad that we saw he did go after the guy that took the kid, and in his mind he fully is bought into this plan of destroy Gotham so he can build it back up. I guess he thinks we'll kill all of its protectors, then they'll need us. And I just think, Jason, you're better than that. And so that is kind of upsetting to me, that I feel like this episode really showed us Jason walking towards his fullest potential and then going to his worst potential. But it was a very good episode. It explained a lot. I'm glad that we know now the full scope of everything that happened. We know whether Jason, you know, I was wondering, like, was Jason fully brainwashed? Like, whereas now we know that he was not. That he was traumatized, he was a scared kid, we know he was, and that, yeah, I think he's been manipulated, and his feelings and fears and everything, fears ironic, have been exaggerated by the Scarecrow, but he has also made a lot of choices himself that he's going to have to live with if we're ever going to get him back into the good side. I missed my Titans, the rest of them, this episode, but this was a very, very good episode. Reminder that you can find the unedited version of this reaction on my Patreon, and thank you so much for watching.